The Islamic Revolution, initiated by Imam Ruhollah Khomeini, may his soul be sanctified, was not merely a situational change or a transitional moment in the course of a nation endowed with wealth, vast geography, and a geopolitically pivotal position regionally and internationally. Instead, it marked a pivotal point in the history of contemporary politics on one hand, and a dedication to the triumph of the living will of a people who had seen their wealth squandered by a ruling elite acting as agents for the Western colonial powers adorned with the royal crown. Poverty and destitution spread, mouths were silenced, and the landmarks of the established civilization were tarnished in the folds of a history that extends back to prehistoric times. The manifestations of the political dynamics accompanying the victory of the Islamic Revolution deepened a new understanding of revolutions towards liberation and change. After the departure of the revolutionary Imam Ruhollah Khomeini, may his soul be sanctified, the focus shifted to the continuation of the revolutionary path. Multiple attempts were made to undermine the revolution from within, either through the hands of proxies or counter-revolutions. However, these efforts collided with the walls of constitutional institutions and the depth of the governing system of the state. The era of enlightenment for the Islamic Republic began under the leadership of Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, may his shadow endure. The outlines of the foreign policy with an axis-oriented nature remained steadfast, unaffected by the collapse of the Soviet Union. On the contrary, it capitalized on it to establish its own axis. Thus, the axis of the free and the revolutionaries formed around the world. Iran became the heart of the resistance axis. The resistance, initially introduced as a slogan and subsequently developed into a project, has become a central axis today. Its components have multiplied, remaining capable of accommodating more, evolving from cooperation to intertwining on various fronts and consolidating in both existence and destiny. Today, the axis of resistance possesses the capability to impose new equations in the nature of the conflict with the Israeli entity and the American dominance in West Asia. Without the axis of resistance, its presence and influence, the United States would have likely succeeded in resolving the Palestinian cause through the deal of the century. This could have occurred amidst the complacency of some Arab regimes that offered billions to undermine the resistance axis to secure their own survival and maintain their relations with Zionist Israel, yet ended up in utter failure. Welcome to the Middle East Stream. I'm Marwa Osman. The success of the Islamic Revolution in Iran was a source of significant changes in the region and the world. This event had a profound impact on awakening Muslims worldwide and revitalizing religious beliefs. With the triumph of the Islamic Revolution, it became evident that Islam was the most potent factor in shaping identity and creating a strong ideology for Islamic groups. Hence, the choice of resistance with Tehran, Damascus, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Sahaabi in Iraq, Ansarullah in Yemen, and Palestinian Resistance defending the Palestinian cause and confronting hegemonic regimes became their top priority. To discuss this issue with us from Beirut is Dr. Hussam Matar, Professor of International Relations and European Studies and geopolitical expert. It's a pleasure having you with us, Dr. Matar. Now, the Islamic Republic of Iran has served as a political and logistical support for the resistance factions or the axis of resistance since the early 80s. That would not have been possible had it not been for the victory of the Islamic Revolution in Iran at the hands of leader Imam Ruhollah Khomeini. However, on many levels, this support has cost Iran a lot, a very heavy price. What stopped Iran from pursuing some sort of a diplomatic approach to its animosity with the West instead of having to fall at risk for supporting all these indigenous resistance all across West Asia?
Peace be upon you. Initially, the reason is that the Islamic Republic wants to be an independent state and adopt an independent project, acknowledging that in this international and regional system, the United States will not allow the Islamic Republic to be independent and will try to thwart it. Therefore, the only option for the Islamic Republic is to be part of a liberation and independent project in the region. Iran realizes that if it joins or submits to the Western project, it will lose its project in the region, becoming a subservient power. Thus, in its desire to be an independent civilization and power, it needs to integrate into a regional project that challenges American dominance and confronts Israeli occupation, aiming to make Western Asia an independent region where its peoples can cooperate and intertwine their interests to achieve independence over their decisions and resources. Therefore, supporting resistance movements by the Islamic Republic ensures its national security and achieves its revolutionary and Islamic vision for the Islamic and Arab world. This is a civilizational idea, and it cannot be achieved without a project to confront American dominance and Israeli occupation in the region.
That's very important, but the West was retaliating in a very interesting way. The Western American orientation aimed to target the axis of resistance from within the countries of the axis. For example, it achieved that by targeting its geographical nodes, inciting social discourse within the environment that supports the resistance factions and the community that supports the resistance factions, and funding the Takfiri groups as well, and depleting the resistance material resources as well. That goes to show that the military power alone against Western hegemony is really not enough, though. Does that not create some sort of a fracture between the environment that supports the resistance axis and the resistance itself, because the community is stuck in what it seems in a spiral of financial, economic, and social torture?
في الواقع رغم الضغوط الأمريكية
In fact, despite American pressures, like any other state, the resistance project does not always need unanimous support throughout societies. It requires a critical mass of the population and citizens who believe in it and embrace it. This is what the forces of resistance in the region and in Iran have succeeded in achieving. They have established a deeply rooted popular base that expands over time and maintains its resilience despite all challenges and risks. The achievements of the resistance forces have proven to a substantial portion of the region's people that it is a successful, viable project with a horizon and a future, a necessary project. Consequently, the supportive environments paid the price for this project through sanctions, killings and wars, but at the same time they saw returns in terms of their security, independence and progress. They viewed it, and still do, as a direction towards the future and the creation of that future. Like other nations and civilizations, they understand that they must sacrifice and pay a high price to ascend this cultural ascent on a regional and global level. At the same time, they see that they are succeeding in doing so. They perceive their project advancing and recognize a level of credibility, belonging and shared sentiment among these populations. Despite everything, this project roots itself socially because it succeeds, providing a realistic and genuine alternative that touches the needs, demands and desires of the people.
Well, we have seen that what really binds the axis of resistance is the Palestinian cause, because they consider it the highest cause there is, namely to liberate Palestine and obviously Al-Quds. This is what all the factions of the resistance say, especially Iran, who refutes allegations that the resistance factions are tied to some sort of a sectarian affiliation to the Islamic Republic. But aren't those factions directly involved in this resistance, majorly all of Shia by affiliation, maybe except Hamas?
In the region, due to its sectarian and religious formations, each period sees a predominant color for the project that opposes dominance. For example, during the Nasserite era, the project confronting the United States and the Israeli enemy had a predominantly Sunni character, with supporting Shia factions. With the emergence of the Islamic Republic, there became a Shia influence and weight in this project, considering that most of the official Arab regimes had abandoned the Palestinian cause and resistance. However, within this formation, there is originally a Shiite force not part of the axis of resistance, and there are Sunni forces in the axis of resistance beyond Hamas, with popular acceptance in Sunni societies for the forces of resistance. This is evident in the high popularity of Hezbollah and Ansarullah in the Islamic world. The crucial aspect is how this formation and project, apart from its sectarian and religious identity, expresses this identity. Does it position itself against other Islamic sects? Does it harbor animosity? Does its project contribute to incitement toward divisions? Or does it reproduce Islamic identities with a broad perspective? seeking Islamic unity and considering the interests of the Islamic world broadly? Does it express readiness to build common interests and establish an Islamic civilization where everyone is a part of it? Therefore, it is not just about the descriptive or formal aspect of who predominates, but about the identity itself, its depth. Does it express itself deeply in a sectarian way in opposition to others, or does it aim to create a broader Islamic identity? The evidence, as mentioned, lies in the numerous friends of this project in the Islamic world who are in harmony with it or even part of it.
So basically, by refuting that this is a sectarian affiliated axis of resistance, do you think that the Al-Aqsa flood operation was the biggest evidence for that, or it still needs a bit of time to be 100% maybe accepted by the rest of the Arab world?
The Al-Aqsa flood operation affirmed that this project is a liberation, Islamic and Arab project. Today, in surveys, the majority of the Arab public supports what happened in the Al-Aqsa flood, endorsing the Hamas movement. A significant portion of this Arab public sees the axis of resistance standing with the Palestinian cause, unlike other forces. Thus, this manifestation is a fundamental factor in deepening the Islamic and global dimension even for the Palestinian cause. However, naturally there will always be voices and programmed campaigns to rekindle sectarian tensions within the region and work on them. Therefore, two opposing trajectories persist, one pushing towards unity, common interests and harmony within the region among its people and nations, the other trajectory attempts throughout to sow ethnic, religious or sectarian divisions to keep the region divided, enabling the United States and the Israeli entity to operate comfortably.
Well, ladies and gents, please stay tuned, because next we will be talking about this axis of resistance having one alliance and one goal. Stay with us. Despite Western and regional countries claiming they do not want the conflict in the Gaza Strip to escalate into a regional conflagration, Iran, Hezbollah, Iraqi Resistance, Syrian Resistance, and the Ansarullah in Yemen are playing an entirely different game. They are patiently and systematically working to strengthen the Axis alliance across the regional battlefield. Today, this axis poses a direct challenge to the regional order established by the West and defended in the Middle East for decades in service of the native people's strategic vision. More details in the following report. In the aftermath of the Al-Aqsa flood operation and the continuous genocidal war on the Palestinian people besieged in the Gaza Strip, Western media outlets have widely circulated the term axis of resistance as a real threat to the occupying entity. The origin of this term can be tracked back to a direct response to the speech of former U.S. President George Bush, who in 2002 labeled Iran, Iraq, and North Korea as the axis of evil. Iranian media at the time saw the term as a fitting title used in their political discourse regarding resistance against American dominance in Iraq, Syria, and the Arab region. However, the concept of the axis of resistance predates the American president's statement by several years. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution in Iran successfully overthrew the Shah, establishing an independent Islamic system that was not aligned with the United States or the Soviet Union. This new system adopted anti-Israeli entity slogans and supported the Palestinian cause, becoming the nucleus of the axis of resistance. The concept of the axis of resistance evolved into a project, and today it has become an expanding Islamic alliance that includes countries and resistance movements such as Iran, Syria, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Ansarullah in Yemen, Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Palestine, and other factions in Gaza, and the Popular Mobilization Forces in Iraq. Collaboration has extended beyond indirect support to involve intervention in various fronts, unity of existence, and shared destiny. the axis of resistance is considered a present and powerful component, serving as a means to unify efforts and coordinate between forces to enhance capabilities and counter military operations and wars launched by colonial and imperial forces. The axis of resistance considers the Palestinian cause as the highest priority and seeks through it to liberate Al-Quds. Hence why, since the first day of the Al-Aqsa flood and in the face of the crimes committed by the occupying entity against the people of Gaza, the axis of resistance has been actively involved. Unlike the countries that normalized relations with the Zionist entity and remained mere spectators, the axis of resistance moved beyond, providing support to resistant movements in Gaza. This support has included launching missiles and drones by the Yemeni army towards the Israeli entity. It also involves striking military bases of U.S. forces and their allies deployed in Syria and Iraq through missile attacks and launching repeated drone operations. Additionally, the axis of resistance engaged in battles in southern Lebanon under the leadership of Hezbollah, dealing defeats to both U.S. and Israeli occupation forces. Observing the victories achieved every day by the fighters of the resistance in Gaza, it becomes evident that they have turned the American equation upside down. This equation sought to create a new Middle East tailored to American measurements and aspirations, but it ended up making way for a unified West Asia fully capable of dealing heavy blows to the Western invaders. We are back from Beirut with Dr. Hossam Matar, Professor of International Relations and European Studies and geopolitical expert. A pleasure, as always, having you on with us, Dr. Matar. Now, the axis of resistance has been actively involved in the fight from the second day of the Al-Aqsa battle in the face of the crimes committed by the Zionist occupation against our people in Gaza. It did not settle for some sort of a passive role, maybe unlike what other normalized entities did. Instead, the axis transitioned to a phase of providing support to the resistance in Gaza. But in reality, what have they really gained from getting into this very risky game?
What the axis of resistance is actually doing operates in several directions. On one hand, it seeks to directly pressure the Israeli enemy to introduce additional variables into Israeli entity calculations, making Zionist Israelis more scattered and increasingly concerned about the continuation of the war in Gaza. It increases risks for the Israeli enemy by threatening it from other fronts, dispersing its resources, diverting its attention, and undermining its capabilities, thus constantly forcing it to consider additional inputs in assessing the balance of power. When the axis of resistance faces any party, it doesn't only calculate the power balance of that party, but looks at the entire axis of resistance and what it can do. There is direct pressure on Israeli Zionists, pressure in calculations and pressure on the ground, scattering this Israeli entity's capacity and rendering them incapable of achieving their goals in a short time before the global wave or international opinion inflates, and puts pressure on their Western allies. On the other hand, the Axis puts pressure on the United States itself and on the international system through its actions in the Red Sea, Lebanon and Iraq, thereby raising the regional risk environment. This pressure to elevate the risk environment urges Americans to expedite actions against Israeli Zionists, pressuring them to stop the fighting or reduce it. The pressure in these two tracks has created a Zionist-American contradiction, with Israeli Zionists wanting more time, while Americans are pushing Israeli Zionists to shorten the time and reduce operations, fearing a wide regional escalation of the conflict.
Mm-hmm. And you think that that was the case for us seeing last week the Iraqi Resistance saying that it will stop at the moment the operations against U.S. occupation forces in Iraq?
The Americans are very disturbed by these targeted attacks as they portray the United States as vulnerable and susceptible to being targeted. They are also concerned that these attacks could trigger significant reactions, gradually escalating the situation. Consequently, managing the escalation becomes challenging, potentially shifting it to a level they can't easily handle. The recent strike in Jordan or at the Jordanian-Syrian border was particularly embarrassing for the Americans. They had to raise the deterrence level to attempt to contain the situation, not with the intention of going into a full-blown war. From the perspective of the Iraqi Resistance, they are aware of the current conditions where strong discussions are underway about the possibility of reaching a ceasefire. There's a sense that pressure is yielding some results in the Palestinian issue, and there's also a debate about the American presence resurfacing in Iraq and the United States. Therefore, the Iraqi Resistance aims to regulate its actions within a specific level to avoid a major confrontation, but rather to erode American influence without engaging in open confrontation.
Well, but Dr. Matar, if that's the case, and that coupled with the Zionist media saying that the range of threats facing the entity has expanded with ballistic missiles from Iran, drones from Lebanon, from Gaza, from Yemen, from Iraq, Syria, they also claim that this position that Zionist Israel is in as one of the most threatened entities in the world at the moment. All of these issues, why haven't they stopped the Zionist entity from continuing this genocide against the Palestinian people? Shouldn't they stop by now?
Because the Israeli enemy believes it received a very severe blow on October the 7th, and that despite all the risks and everything it might endure, it cannot stop this war before achieving at least a symbolic and partial accomplishment. It sees that in its weakened reality it cannot escape without facing a complete defeat. It cannot exit without compensating for losses or without demonstrating strength or achieving some accomplishments. Therefore, the Israeli entity leaders believe they are caught in what is called the non-choice war. They have no option but to engage in this war, attempting to minimize losses more than gaining gains. Despite their discomfort and concern about the pressures from various axes, they believe they have to come out in some way restoring the strategic deterrence. As they say, in order to stay in the region, if we emerge with a complete defeat from this war, we will have to leave. Therefore, we must bear the burdens to try to restore part of what happened on October 7th.
But how? I mean, they completely destroyed Gaza. What is their plan?
They believe that ethnic cleansing is a solution. They are attempting to embark on a project of genocide and displacement, thinking that this could serve as compensation. However, they encountered several problems, including the resilience of the resistance in Gaza, the steadfastness of the Palestinian people in Gaza, tensions, Egypt's rejection of the displacement project, and the American concerns. The US has pressured the occupation entity to refrain from proceeding with this project due to the potential widespread deterioration in the region. All of this, in addition to global public opinion responses resulting from events shared on social media and global media, is exerting pressure on this Israeli project to prevent it from achieving its goals. Now the Zionists are saying we are achieving tactical military accomplishments, but alongside them there are strategic defeats and losses.
Well, if the war in Gaza were to stop tomorrow morning, Dr. Matar, what would that day look like for the axis of resistance in specific, in terms of the consequences that it most definitely will be forced to face given the escalation in the Red Sea, the escalation on the border between Lebanon and occupied Palestine, and the targeting of US military bases in Iraq and Syria? How do you see that day?
Firstly, for the vision of this day to be complete, we have to wait until the battle concludes entirely, and this war reaches its full conclusion, making the scene clearer. There are aspects that will emerge later, but overall, Zionist Israel will emerge from this war more divided internally. It will come out with the Palestinian issue returning to be a fundamental part of its own agenda, as well as the regional and international agendas. Zionist Israel will emerge from this war with deeply damaged relations with the West and the United States, which it considers a vital part of its security. Zionist Israel will exit this war with a distorted image and an extremely troubled relationship with the international public opinion, which is also significant for Israeli Zionists. The axis of resistance has demonstrated that Zionist Israel will come out of this war facing challenges. In the face of this, the axis of resistance has proven to be a cohesive and integrated force, playing multiple roles according to the capabilities of each theatre. All of this has become a reality in the region, revealing genuine capabilities. No longer just a potential project, but a real force. New power dynamics will emerge in the region that will impact all regional powers within the area, causing them to reassess their policies on this basis. the United States will come out of this wreckage severely damaged in terms of its image within the region. The international system that the United States sponsors will exit with much less credibility among the peoples of the global South. It will become significantly less trusted, accelerating the ongoing transformations at both the regional and international system levels in recent years.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussam Mata, Professor of International Relations and European Studies and geopolitical expert, for your time this very early morning with us. It's a pleasure having you with us. Ladies and gents, thank you for watching. Please do follow us on Telegram and on Twitter X. And we promise to always give you the latest from right here on Press TV's The Midi Stream. Assalamu alaikum.